Shalom, everybody. Yesterday we reviewed the three categories of people who are sick. One was deathly ill or dangerously ill, one who's in between, and one is mildly ill and is able to walk around. Um, and so that's what we'll talk about today. And then we'll continue to the middle category. As is well known, there are two types of Shabbat prohibitions, Torah prohibitions and rabbinic prohibitions. The latter type is also called Shvut, from the word Shabbat, but it means like that we rest from it even though it's not in the Torah. There is a principle that one desecrates Shabbat and performs even melachot prohibited by Torah law on behalf of a gravely ill person, someone whose life is in danger. In contrast, when caring for someone who is ill but whose life is not in danger, one may not violate Torah prohibitions. However, the sages permitted the violation of prohibitions that they themselves enacted to treat someone who is sick. And again, this is a review. One who is bedridden due to his illness is considered a regular sick person, even if for some reason he is not actually lying down. He is considered sick as long as this is the type of illness that generally causes people to lie down. This morning we saw somebody in a wheelchair in the blood clinic, and she actually asked her daughter, do you think that I could walk from here to the chair so that they can take my blood instead of staying in the wheelchair? So obviously she wasn't completely incapacitated or crippled. It was just out of comfort. Similarly, if one is suffering from pain that weakens their entire body, for example, a migraine, they're considered a sick person, even if they have not yet actually gone to lie down. Furthermore, even if one is walking around and looks well, if it is clear that without a particular treatment they will need to lie down, one may transgress rabbinic prohibitions to prevent this from happening. So when I had leukemia, there were a few times that I was allowed um, to walk around in my house, uh, but I had to stay with a mask at all times. And then one of the nurses actually caught me. I did not know that her nephew is my friend who was getting married, and she told me that she's not going to tell on me to the doctors, but that I should leave immediately and go back home. So somebody took me. So that was a good example for this idea about needing to lie down or not needing to. If a child needs something very badly, and we already said that the child cries and makes themselves actually even more sick, and therefore they are considered a sick person, even if they have not gone to lie down. Um, and hysteria and crying endlessly actually weakens them even more. So we try to prevent that. If you remember, we talked about that also in the context of taking something out of their hand. Sorry, not taking something out of their hand when we're in a place where there's no eruv. The easiest and most accepted way of taking care of a sick person is with the help of a non-Jew. As we have seen, under normal circumstances, the sages prohibited asking a non-Jew to undertake melacha on behalf of a Jew on Shabbat, but they permitted doing so for the sake of a sick person, or l'tzorach gadol, or l'tzorach mitzvah. Therefore, one may ask a non-Jew to turn a light on or off for a sick person, to turn the heater on or off, to cook food for them, to travel in order to bring them medication, to press elevator buttons for them, and to administer even X-ray machine for them. Similarly, one may ask a non-Jewish dentist to treat a patient whose toothache is causing them pain that extends throughout their body. One may ask a non-Jewish doctor to write a prescription for a sick person, and one may ask a non-Jew to drive a sick person to the doctor or to the hospital. In such a case, a Jew may accompany the patient on condition that neither they nor the sick person performed any melacha themselves. By the way, in terms of this idea of driving to the doctor, there's also the idea of it's not here because we're not learning the laws of Avilut, but in the time of the Rishonim, and maybe even until not so long ago, if somebody died on Yantiv, especially a 3-day Yantiv, meaning Thursday, Friday, and then Shabbat, So the community would ask the non-Jewish people to bury the dead, because in those days there was no way to refrigerate them, and it would cause even more dishonor to the person who passed away. I believe in our, even our community, we postponed a levaya for somebody who died on the first day of Shavuos, and we postponed it till the day after the second day of Shavuos. But again, this is directly asking them, not the hint, which is applicable for most people. So, for example, if you left um, something on the stove and it's going to burn, then you are allowed to hint to the non-Jewish person that if we leave it on the stovetop for any further time, it will burn, and so they understand from our hint that they'll turn it off. The same thing with air conditioning and heating. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the idea of directly asking a non-Jew to do all these things which are um, the oraita on behalf of somebody who is sick. A regular sick person, now that's where we are shifting. A regular sick person may take whatever medications they need, since the rabbinic prohibition against taking medication applies only to a mildly sick person, which will be the next halacha. If no non-Jew is available, according to the Ran, a Jew may not transgress rabbinic prohibitions for a sick person. According to Yeshivas, however, they may, and we follow this position in practice. However, lechatchila, if possible, it is still preferable to arrange for a non-Jew to do whatever is necessary, or for a Jew to use a shinui, so that the prohibition will be reduced to a shvut shvut, a double leniency, as we saw above. If there is no choice and the sick person desperately needs care, a Jew may do rabbinically prohibited melachot on their behalf. For example, if they need a light turned on or off, one should do this with a shinui, such as using one's arm or leg, so that the prohibition is only rabbinic, only again in quotation marks. Similarly, if a sick person needs the heater or air conditioner turned on or off, one may do so with a shinui. So now we are going to the third category of somebody who's only mildly sick person and experiencing discomfort. If one walks around and seems to be healthy, but in fact is mildly sick or experiencing discomfort, their status is the same as that of anyone else. They must observe all Shabbat prohibitions, including the rabbinic ones. The permission to transgress rabbinic prohibitions, as explained in the previous halacha, is for a regular sick person, but this permission does not extend to one who is bothered by a mild illness or ailment. Therefore, if the light is bothering them, one may not ask a non-Jew to turn it off. If they need light, heat, or air conditioning, one may not ask a non-Jew to turn them on, and it would be the same like what we talked about, the example that we can do a remez, a hint. Even asking a non-Jew to do these things with a shinui, which would reduce the prohibition to a shvut, is prohibited because all rabbinic prohibitions still apply to them. All of this applies in a case where the illness is merely irritating and uncomfortable. However, if the illness or ailment causes pain, one may relieve it by performing a shvut. For example, something that we today would not consider makashel halal, literally internal injury, but the rabbis talked about the back of the hand and the back and the top of the foot. Um, so that is causing pain, and we don't know if maybe there's an internal bleeding, and so that's why it will be again even more lenient. If a person suffering has a great need for light, heat, or air conditioning, one may ask a non-Jew to turn them on using a shinui, such as with their arm. However, a Jew may not do so even with a shinui, because there would still be a standard rabbinic prohibition which applies even when there's some pain. And so that's why they talk about specifically the inside of the mouth and other internal organs, and like I said, the back of the hand and of the top of the foot. If one's fingernail has been torn off If you remember, we talked about this a little bit in the laws of mikvah. Most of the way and is bothersome, this is considered an ailment, and one may not remove the nail even via shvut to shvut. However, if the torn nail is painful, one may remove it using a shinui, such as with one's hand or teeth. Since most of the nail has already been torn off, it is viewed as if it has already fallen off, and therefore it's not kotzer, the prohibition of harvesting, of taking fruit off their growth. So the prohibition to tear it off completely is only rabbinic. And for this reason, the sages permitted removing a nail with a shinui if it is causing pain. If the nail was not torn off most of the way but is painful, one may ask a non-Jew to remove it with a shinui, since doing so again reduces it to a shvut to shvut. So basically, all of these principles are to remind us how to make it more simple and also more lenient in case of need. Similarly, if a splinter becomes embedded in a person's skin and it's clear that removing it will cause bleeding, one may not remove it if it is merely irritating. However, if it is painful, which most of the time it is, one may remove it, since the prohibition of causing bleeding in this way is only a shvut to shvut, because you don't need the blood, as one does not intend to cause bleeding, and the bleeding is affected via shinui as a side effect of removing the thorn. And so we'll stop here and open up for questions.